All right, welcome back to our Coaching Network. I'm Pat Curran, one of the co-founders here. Today, we've got Chris Cook. He is an offensive quality control coach with the Denver Broncos. And we're going to do this one a little bit different, not your typical Wednesday night clinic talk. Chris has got a great story. As I told you, Chris, I've heard about your story a couple of times, but I didn't want to dig too deep. I want to hear it from you. And from there, I'll let you just take it. So go ahead, take it away, Chris.
All right, man. I appreciate you having me on, man. Anytime I get a chance to connect and talk, I love talking ball always. I can talk football all day, but it's also cool to kind of talk a little bit about the story of how I got to where I am. Simply because obviously I know my story, but I feel like my story may help other coaches because it's a lot of guys that I know that want to get into coaching and they're scared to take that leap. They're scared to, wondering, what, it's not necessarily the most secure and stable profession in the world. And, so they get nervous about it. So, I'm like, sometimes it's good for me just to I feel like my story may encourage, somebody to take that leap, so that's why I love sharing my story. I guess it all kind of started back, I would say, in 2008, 2009, actually 2009, after the Arena Football League shut down. The Arena Football League, I was playing out in Kansas City, played out there. And then after the 2008 season, they decided to fold the Arena League. And the owners and, all that stuff kind of went on. And so after that had happened, a lot of guys in the AFL were stuck. There were a lot of guys that didn't necessarily finish. They may have left school early to go to the NFL or, they just never really finished school. But for me, I was one of the fortunate ones that did. So I just knew that it was time for me to kind of think post-football. I was like, okay, this is probably the end of the road. So what's next for me? And through my time, I really didn't realize what I wanted to do until I got into the Arena League. Once we started doing a lot of community service and going out in the community and working in neighborhoods and holding camps and doing, just doing things with kids out in the community. And then once I started doing that, I was like, you know what, I could see myself doing this. If I'm not playing football, I always felt like working with youth in some capacity would be something that I would want to go to. But I didn't necessarily think it was going to be the little kids. It wasn't necessarily the little kids. I found myself gravitating kind of towards that high school age youth because I felt like those kids needed somebody like me, like around them, kind of, not necessarily, those kids that just needed somebody, they just needed them a lot. So that's kind of where that thought came from. So back in 2009, I made a decision, hey, the AFL is done. I made a decision to move back to North Carolina from Kansas City, Missouri. And I went back to North Carolina, went back to the Charlotte area. And that's where I got connected at Weddington High School with Justin Harden. Justin Harden was the coach there. I got connected with him and talked to him on the phone. It was a great fit. I went to North Carolina, we talked, and I ended up coaching defensive line for him in 2009. At that time, I had a fiance at the time, met her, she's my wife now, she's out in Kansas, she's from Kansas City. So, being subbing inside of, I still had a little money from the AFL, but subbing inside of a high school and coaching on a stipend, obviously that wasn't going to get it. So I had started to kind of put some fillers out about some youth development stuff. So I threw my name out there in the hat for a club director position at the Boys and Girls Club in Raleigh, North Carolina. So the Boys and Girls Club of Wake County. And got a call back, went up, interviewed. So I had to tell Justin, like, hey, man, I'm about to get married, dude. I gotta get a career going here, So I ended up taking this Boys and Girls Club job. Had never worked in a Boys and Girls Club in my life. Had never really necessarily been in charge. Had never hired a staff. Had never ran programs and all that.
Had you been in one as a kid yourself?
No.
Were you familiar with Boys and Girls Club?
I was
even at all. Okay.
familiar with it because of just some of the projects that we worked on in Kansas City. That's how I kind of got connected with it. Like, okay, I like the mission. I like what they're doing. So when I got back, I was like, let me find a Boys and Girls Club and see what they're doing. So that's what led me to kind of reach out to Boys and Girls Clubs. So I ended up interviewing and I got the job. I got it. I got the job like May of 2010. And I'll be completely honest, I fell in love with the job. I fell in love with it. I had my own teen center. It was the dream job for me simply because it was high school students only. So my Boys and Girls Club was an absolute teen center. You had to be in the 9th grade, 9th through 12th grade to be in there. No middle schoolers, no elementary kids. So it was the perfect setting for me because that's the age group that I wanted to work with. But through that time of being in the Boys and Girls Club, I always kept my coaching fix. And my coaching fix was kind of connected through the Duke staff. My best friend, who's still my best friend to this day, Terrell Smith, he's actually at Penn State now in the recruiting department, but he was at Duke. He played at Duke, went to Duke, and he was on Coach Cutt's staff in the off-the-field support staff role. And he would always say, hey, why don't you, Coach Cutt had just got to Duke around 2009, I think. 2008, 2009, I think is when he got to Duke. And he was like, hey, you should come work camp over the summer. And I'm like, well, I'm not coaching anyway. He was like, we still need a bunch of coaches. We're going to have over 500 kids out here. We need as many guys. Let's all hands on deck out here. So I ended up going to Duke in 2009 and coaching camp. And I mean, it was kind of like my summer vacation for me. I get 3 weeks every weekend. I get to go coach these one-day camps, my hat on backwards, get to coach ball, but then I get to go back to work, on Monday. So every year after camp, and that went on from 2009 to 2015, I coached camps with Coach Cutt and his whole Duke staff. And during that time, the relationships I built with those guys were amazing. I mean, some of those guys, they ended up, Derek Jones, I mean, his wife and my wife ended up connecting. I'm just a Boys and Girls Club worker, but my wife is connected with those guys' wives. And, I'm just spending time after time with them, going by the office and watching ball, talking ball, coaching camps, and just got really connected with them and just built crazy relationships with them. And one of the relationships I built after he came, I knew him prior to, but when he came back from the Steelers was Scotty Montgomery, who came back to be the offensive coordinator at Duke in 2014, I believe. He came back from the Steelers around 13 or 14 and went back to Duke, where he ended up becoming the offensive coordinator. So me and Scotty, we always been close and we always talk all the time. And Coach Cutt would always come to me after camps, Coach, you need to be coaching. You need to be coaching. You need to be coaching. So it got to one point where I said, well, you want me to coach? Y'all need to hire me then. So that was kind of like the running joke at Duke. Like every year after camp, they were like, here's our, long lost staff member here. Like it just became a running joke. Well, one day in 2014, I built a brand new Boys and Girls Club in Raleigh, $3.5 million facility, beautiful facility, loved it. I designed it, put all the programming in it, and that was like my baby. Well, Scotty had called me and he had told me, he said, I want to come by and see it. So he comes by to see it. And after he came by to see it, he calls me in the office. I show him around, I tour him around, and he pulls me in my office and we sit and talking, and he goes, so how bad do you want to coach? He said, you want to coach? I'm like, of course I want to coach. He was like, he said, well, one day I'm going to be a head football coach. And he flat out told me, he said, if you want to coach, you're going to have to go be a coach. He was like, because when I become a head football coach, you're a guy that I would hire. He said, but I can't hire a Boys and Girls Club worker. And I'm like, and he was like, obviously no disrespect to you. He said, but the perception, how am I going to be for my first head coaching job? How can I justify bringing on a Boys and Girls Club director to my coaching staff? He was like, so you got to be coaching. If you really want to coach at this level, you got to get back in it. Well, it was kind of ironic. My building had just got up and running. I didn't really want to leave it. Didn't want to leave the kids there that I had in there. They, I loved them to death. But my wife at the time, she had gotten an offer maybe 2 weeks before he came to my building. And we were like wrestling back and forth, like, should we, what should we do? It was a really good position. One of those ones where, shoot, hey, we got to take this. But it had been 2 weeks later when Scotty came to me, it was kind of like, maybe that's the sign that I need to go ahead and jump out and take that leap of faith. At that point is when I decided, it's probably time to take that leap of faith. So it kind of comes back full circle because the position was in Charlotte. So it allowed me to go back towards home. All right. And then it allowed me to make one phone call and have a coaching job in 5 minutes because I just called Justin back because he had moved on to Independence High School. So I called him and said, hey, I'm coming back. And he was like, what position do you want to coach and when are you going to be here? So I was able to basically get back into coaching in 5 minutes. So we go back to Charlotte and I leave the Boys and Girls Club. So I left, that's where I left at that point. And at that point, I said, okay, if I'm going to make this move, there were a lot of sacrifices that had to be made. And that's kind of some of the keys that, I can kind of talk about those after I kind of get through the story, just so we can kind of lay the groundwork of the whole situation. But I go coach Independence, met some great guys there. Met some unbelievable guys there. Obviously, I knew Justin, the defensive coordinator at the time. He's Michael Hertz. He ended up leaving and getting another high school head coaching job. Chris James, another defensive back coach. I mean, he's one of the brightest young mind coaches in the Charlotte area. So I ended up connecting with a lot of great guys there. And but 6 months later, Scotty Montgomery gets the head job at East Carolina University. 2 weeks after he's named the head coach, he calls me and he offers me a position on his as a QC for him on his staff. So I always will say Scotty did what he told me he would do. I did my part. And I took that leap of faith. And once I did that, I think that let him know that I was truly serious. So he knew, okay, this guy is really serious. So he didn't hesitate to bring me on. Well, a year later, talking about your Duke connections and those guys, I'm leaving spring practice one day from East Carolina, going to pick my kids up from daycare. And Jeff Ferris, who's now the co-OC at Duke, he calls me. He said, hey, man, Chattanooga's running back coach just left. And they're talking about maybe doing some shuffling on the staff and maybe looking for a tight end guy with some O-line background. He was like, I just saw their OC on the road recruiting. I gave him your name. He may call you. And he was like, and I know you played at Chattanooga and you went there. So he was like, that'd be a great fit for you. He was like, so just be expecting a call from Chattanooga. I said, okay, cool. Probably an hour later, the offensive coordinator from Chattanooga calls me. We end up talking. I end up going up there and interviewing, sitting and talking to Coach Arth and Justin Rascotti at the time. And I didn't know them. I knew they were the guys at my alma mater, but I had no prior relationship with anybody on that staff. So end up interviewing and becoming a tight ends coach at Chattanooga for 2 seasons. And then when Coach Arth got the Akron job, I went with him to Akron and now here in Denver, but I'm going to fold back to the Chattanooga stint for just a minute. So Jeff Ferris connects me with Justin Rascotti, who was the OC at the time. Well, during that Chattanooga time, I was fortunate to coach really one of my most favorite tight ends in the world I probably coached. His name's Jacob Webster. Well, his dad is actually Rustin Webster, who is a former Titans GM, and he's now a national scouting director with the Falcons. Well, I reached out to him one day about the Bill Walsh minority internship. I was like, I've heard about it. I heard a lot of coaches, say they, it's a great experience. I was just wanting to connect with you and just see how do I go about that. I wasn't necessarily even asking them to put me on. I just wanted to know, like, if he could give me some insight about how the process worked and everything. And he ended up saying, hey, send me your information. And, I ended up getting a call one evening from Scott Pioli with the Falcons. And he was like, hey, got your information from Rustin. Want to get you into Atlanta and see if you want to be a part of our internship. I'm like, well, absolutely. Well, I get into Atlanta, and it's like a great experience, probably one of the best experiences I ever had, with that first opportunity to be inside of an NFL building, and get that coaching experience and being around those guys and being around obviously some of the best coaches in the world, at this level. So I was able to actually get 2 seasons with the Falcons. That 2018 season and that 2019 season, I was able to intern with them during a week or so of their OTAs. And in that time, that's where I met Wade Harmon. Wade Harmon was the tight ends coach at the Falcons in 2018. And then 2019, I was actually an intern with Callie Brownson, who's now the chief of staff with the Browns. And she, her and I, we connected, really well, in Atlanta. And she ends up getting with the Browns. So when we go to Akron, I end up connecting with Callie. And in 2020, it was virtual, but I interned with them again with the Browns in 2020. So ended up, connecting with that staff, awesome staff there. And then in this past probably 2 months ago, me and Rascati have a great relationship. Me and Justin Rascati. Well, Justin Rascati is with the Broncos. All right. So Justin had called me one day. I'm on a treadmill, like literally on the treadmill, getting a workout in Akron. And he calls me and said, hey, bro, are you ready? I'm like, I'm not ready. He's like, what's going on? He's like, hey, look, we had some stuff move or shake around here. And, I think it's something that we have that you would be great for. And he was like, I brought your name up. I think they want to give you a call and chat with you about it. So I ended up talking to those guys. And here I am moving into Denver, now. And I know that's kind of like a quick kind of version of it, but I feel like I said a couple of things that, that led to it. And the first thing I would say was relationships. This wouldn't have happened without developing relationships along the way. You have like Justin Hard.
Were you intentional in doing that, or that just kind of authentically happened?
Absolutely intentional. You have to be. It's about developing relationships, staying connected, not just calling guys when you need something. Like I don't just call guys if I'm looking for if a job is open or do you know somebody here? Do you know somebody there? Or when you need something, or only pick up the phone when they call if I need something from them. Trust was huge. In this profession, if guys don't trust you, it's going to be hard for you to get ahead, because when anybody who's in this profession knows once you put your name on a guy, that guy is a part of your resume. I mean, like it's hard to just put your name on people that you can't trust and vouch for. And then surrounding yourself around the circle. Your circle is extremely important. The people you're surrounding yourself around in the profession is so important. And I always felt like I had really good guys around me from the high school level, from the college level. And from the college level, it helped me in recruiting because I had great relationships with guys at the high school level. And then going into it, having a plan. I had a plan. I would always have my plan. Trust the plan. Sometimes you got to adjust the plan, but you go back to trusting the plan. You always got to trust the plan that you have, just knowing there's going to come a point where you're going to have to adjust that plan at some point. And like you said, being intentional. That's my 2 words. My one word of the year. Each year I try to give myself one word. And in 2020 and 2021, I actually ended up with the same word, was intentional. Like it's just, you have to have that, in order to move forward. And being intentional, oftentimes you have to invest in yourself. I think a lot of guys don't do that. A lot of guys, and for whatever reason, investing in yourself doesn't always mean spending money on yourself. Investing in yourself is just reaching out and connecting with somebody and learning from someone. Investing in yourself can mean a whole lot of different things. But I always took time to invest in myself, whether it's going and meeting with somebody, getting some advice from somebody. And not everything is all about me learning football. I want to be a head coach in my career. And I tell anybody that. I'm intentional about that. I want to be a head football coach. And the only way you can learn how to be a head football coach is talk to guys that have been in that position who also maybe want to be head coaches, or they already have been a head coach. So, so just learning more than football, how to run a program, just being really intentional on different things and investing in yourself. I never chased the money.
What level head coach do you want to be at?
You know what? I'll be honest. I would love to coach at the National Football League, be a head coach at the National Football League. But the college level as well, college level or National Football League. I want to be a head football coach. But never chasing the money, because if I was chasing money, I probably wouldn't be coaching now, simply because there were some positions that I took where I wasn't making like a lot of money, because every year that I've been coaching, I've been also offered great positions to come back to work at a higher level of the Boys and Girls Club. So I could have left coaching almost 3 or 4 times and went and made a lot more money, being on a higher level, kind of in more of an administrative level in the Boys and Girls Club world. But I stayed the course, and I trusted the process, and I trusted the plan that I had for myself. And now one of my goals to coach in the National Football League came true, and it happened for me. And I think the last key is the significant other is probably one of the most important pieces in that move. I moved from Raleigh to Charlotte to Greenville, North Carolina, to Chattanooga, Tennessee to Akron to Denver, all since 2016. No, I'm sorry, 2000. Yeah, starting in 2015, 16. Yes. So I did all of that moving in the last 5 or 6 years. And if you don't have somebody that's willing to make that ride and that journey with you, I promise it's not going to work. So your wife, husband, if you got any ladies on here, your husband, your wife, whatever, you have to have a great relationship with them, because they have to be locked in and they have to be a part of the journey too, because if they're not, it's just not going to work. So they have to be a part of the process as well.
Yeah, that support is so huge. I don't know if I was unmuted. I've been going off and on mute. And you other guys on here, if you got any thoughts, questions, or want to pop in, either put a question in the chat box or just raise your hand. I'll unmute you. But I love a bunch of the stuff you said. And I'm from Cleveland. I used to live in Charlotte. I'm in Los Angeles now, but I liked all this Charlotte and Northeast Ohio tie-ins personally myself. But so you talked about investing in yourself. I think that's a lot of what especially young coaches struggle with. Like, how do I do that? How do I do it in an authentic way? How do I do it and not just be like, coach, teach me shit, or call coach because you want to get a job, but you're trying to pretend like you're trying to learn something type deal. How did you go about investing in yourself, especially when you're starting as a high school coach, right?
Well, I think the first thing from a monetary standpoint, I always have made sure I set money back, for anything, I'm just strictly talking money right now. From a monetary standpoint, always making sure there was a cushion, that I had some form of a cushion. It was one point where, like my mom, like support, like when I was in the Charlotte area, my mom and my family, like, because at that time my kids were like 2 and 1, like, so they were really young. So I had family who would, like, instead of daycare, like, hey, why don't y'all just bring them to the house, so those type of things, so that the family aspect was taken care of. But in terms of investing in myself from that, the going to the conventions, and whether I had to pay for it out of my pocket or whatever. Told you my best friend at the time, he was at, was he at Duke still, ECU, maybe Duke? I think he may have been at Duke at the time. So when I would go to conventions, I'd stay with him, instead of spending that type of money. So for young coaches, I would say, especially young coaches with family. I hate to say it, man, those guys don't have excuses not to like be able to grind it out. It's hard. I know guys want to make the money, and I know those things, but when guys can make it happen with wives and kids, I know young coaches can make it with nothing else to do. You know what I mean? So unless you just got a serious situation, that you have to take care of your business, I understand that. But just from the investment, spending time meeting people, going out in conventions and not just standing on the wall and watching guys walk by, grab a coach, go to conventions and go to clinics with a plan. The best thing Coach Montgomery did with us at East Carolina is they paid for us to go to the convention, but he sent us there with an agenda. We had to meet like 2 or 3 coaches. He gave us questions that he wanted us to ask. We had to talk. It was just professional questions / ball questions. We had to type up the report and bring it back to him. And that was the greatest thing that he could have ever done to us when he sent young guys to the convention, because a lot of guys a lot of coaches send their whole staff there and they send their GAs, and GAs just go and they don't know what they're doing. Like you can tell a GA when you walk by him, just because they kind of congregate together, they stay together, and they kind of walk in packs or whatever. But like when he forced us to kind of get out and do that, it was an investment. Like it was like, okay, he's sending us here. All right. So now we got to get here and go meet people. And that was the best thing that ever happened, was that he forced us to kind of go and do that. But from that standpoint, getting out on spring breaks, young guys especially, don't go to the beach. Go find your coach to go learn something from. Hey, go sit and talk ball at a school, at a university, because a lot of times when you just go sit and talk ball, you don't realize you're interviewing. You don't realize that, because you're sitting there, you're talking ball in just a normal general setting. And one day that coach is going to be like, you remember that guy from such and such university or such and such? We talked ball, that kid was pretty sharp. Hey, we got a position. Hey, call that kid. And now they already know you. So spend time like reaching out and trying to go learn as much as you can, and understand that the money will come, man. The money will come. Just stay grounded.
Yeah, I totally agree. I also was the GA, you could definitely point out, but I was also the dumbass walking around in a suit all day because I thought I was going to get an interview for a GA job. I was a D2 GA. I thought I was going to interview at Akron for a GA spot. That guy was he was same day interviewing for a higher position at a different school, and he left, which is ironic. But that's I mean, not to just plug our stuff, what we're doing here, but that's what we want to create here. You see there's guys on here that are always on, and they're always on talking to coaches, and they're on to hear you talk, or they're on to hear so-and-so talk special teams or D-line, or there's this opportunity now that's different than what you had a year ago. Right now, everyone's used to this stuff. There's clinics, not just us, but there's live clinics. There's people doing their own live clinics. We know multiple people that have gotten jobs based off of clinics they did on here specifically, and was able to send and show people that stuff. And I know other friends that have gotten positions based on them getting on Zoom calls, not intentionally to go get a job, but intentionally to, hey, let's talk ball. Like last summer, let's talk ball. You're on offense, I'm on defense. Let's just talk. What are you doing here? What are you doing in this situation? And then that led to a position being offered when a guy gets a job. So that happens all the time. I think this opportunity now is huge. I don't have to go to Denver to talk to you anymore. I don't have to go to, to meet with KK. I go all the way to UConn or something like that. So I love the opportunity, and I think more coaches need to take advantage of that. Question for you, unless you were going to add something to that.
Oh, you good?
Okay. Question for you. Who has been the most influential coach, mentor during your coaching journey, and why?
I would probably say it would probably have to be Scotty Montgomery. It has to be Scotty Montgomery. And simply because the reason I say Scotty Montgomery and David Cutcliffe would probably be 1A, 1B. because they both bring a different element. So however I want to place it would probably be put the 1A and the 1B, but it would probably be Scotty Montgomery and David Cutcliffe. And the reason I say those two guys are, and it remove football away from it. Those are some of the greatest dudes walking in the coaching profession. Great guys. Coach Cutcliffe, if I had an opportunity to say model kind of how I wanted to be as a coach and like known as a coach, it would be like him. Period. It would be like him. The way he is with his staff, the way he is with the players, the way he is with the community, the way he just everything about him is really good. From Scotty's standpoint, I think he learned a lot of his stuff from Coach Cut and Mike Tomlin. Those are like two of his main guys of his tree. And I think that the kind of the way Scotty approaches it, kind of like Coach Cut, but puts his own spin on it. Very thorough.
Is he frozen to you guys?
Major influences on me. Then of course,
hey coach, you for a second. I didn't know if that was just my computer here, but you froze. You were just getting into talking about off of the field, not even football, great dudes, all that stuff, and then you froze up a little bit. If you don't mind going back on.
Oh, okay. No, I was just saying, like off the field, those guys were just, kind of just great in the sense of the way that they carry themselves, the way they treat their staff, the way they treat the players, how strong they are in the community, just everything about it. They're detailed, they're organized, they're thorough, they have a system, they have a plan, they stick to the plan. Like everybody knows what's going on. There are no secrets, it's just a way of life for them. And I just what So when you get around something and you learn it, and that's what you kind of just take it and you put your own little spin to it. Then obviously my high school coach, Coach John Lowry at Forest Hills. That guy taught me. Middle school coaches, Greg Blake. I got a list of them, but from the main sense of what we're talking about, I probably would have to go with Coach Cut and Scotty Montgomery. And Scotty's now the running back coach with the Colts.
Yep. What I always like to ask coaches this: what do you wish, or what do you know now that you wish you knew when you first started out, and what would you have changed being that first time around?
Ooh. If I could say, I'm gonna go way back. Some days I wrestle with, should I left college and went straight into being like a GA? Like, where would I be right now? So sometimes I wrestle with that, but I also say there's no way I would want to give up the experience that I had to play in the AFL and everywhere I traveled and all the guys I met and just that life, that was so great. But I would say, I don't know, because I couldn't have started my career out working with I worked with a guy I really liked and knew him well. So I can't say there's a lot I would have changed. I can't really say other than kind of wrestling what should I had started out as a GA instead of going to play or chasing the dream of playing in the league. And I guess that's probably the biggest thing I probably would have changed, like maybe so.
Got you. Interesting. Usually coach has something a little bit, usually I heard one coach is like, take out my ego early. That's a little different thing, but from a path wise, it's awesome that you can appreciate where you were and how you started and said, I wouldn't, no matter what I would have done, if I'd have been a GA at the best school in the country at the time, I wouldn't have got to where I am. So screw it. I'm glad I started here to work to go to my path.
And it's cool. It's funny you say that, and it's cool you say that is because in my life, I feel like I have done, from a career-wise, everything. I have done everything that I wanted to do. Go back to, I went to college on scholarship. All right. I graduated college. Maybe didn't go to the NFL, but I got a chance to play professional football, traveled the United States, made money playing football. All right. I got a chance to run my own Boys and Girls Club. I always wanted to work. I said I wanted to work with youth in the high school age group. So I was able to have a career 5.5 years of running my own Boys and Girls Club. I got a chance to coach Division I college football. All right. And now I get to coach in the National Football League. What is there to change? You know what I'm saying? Like, what I've done everything that I wanted to do in life from a career standpoint. I've done it all. So that's why it's hard for me to say changing. Like, what's there to change? I've accomplished and had a chance to do everything I've set out and wanted to do. So, I mean, it's hard for me to just sit here and say, yeah, I would change from an ego, but those things like that, I think because of my path and what I've done in terms of the career, Boys and Girls Club, things like that, ego standpoint, older getting into the coaching profession versus younger getting to the coaching profession is much smoother because I've run my own Boys and Girls Club, which is kind of like being a head coach. So when I sit in those meetings, I see sometimes what the head coach is seeing, and I've hired people, I fired people. I had a budget that I had to manage. I had to go to board meetings. I had to do all that stuff. So sometimes sitting in those meetings, I can give some pretty solid, sound advice too. It may not be from a coaching head coach, but running what I ran is the same deal. It's the same situation.
You're managing people, right? Same type of vibe.
Managing people.
When I was a GA, I sat there and listened. You know, I might have been able to say something, but I'd never had the power to ever say anything. Like you would have been a GA, you'd have been at the back of the room, whereas you were at the head of the room of the Boys and Girls Club. So of course, I love that mindset on it too.
Being in these roles like QC roles and GA roles, like if you're not soaking up that knowledge that coaches are spewing out, man, you are like I'm enjoying kind of being back in the QC role again because I can like laser focus on the room, like I can hear everything, I can like be back to learning. I'm back learning all over again. I'm loving it. I'm absolutely loving it.
You know who was a GA when I played at Bowling Green? GA for us was Zach Gazzani, who's now the receivers coach for the Denver Broncos. Yep. Yeah. So it's funny to see a guy like my GAs were that were when I played, of course, were Zach Gazzani, Matt Campbell, who's the Iowa State head coach, and DJ Durkin, who was the Maryland head coach a couple years ago too. Those were all GAs. Obviously, guys that took advantage of that role of being a GA, soaking the shit out of Urban Meyer and some other guys we had at the time, right. and you know, continuing to grow themselves. Here's another question for you from somebody else. How was that combo with your wife when you decided to take that leap of faith?
Initially, it was kind of like, so what happens if it doesn't work? And I didn't have an answer. And like, usually I got an answer.
Well, you guys weren't married at this time. This wasn't fiance, right?
No.
Okay. So you're married. All right. Go ahead. Sorry.
We had been married for 5 years at this time. We got married in 2010, so we were 5 years in at this time. So in the beginning, I really didn't have an answer. So the question kind of was, what happens if it doesn't work, and how long are you going to try to chase this? And like it was like, well, not necessarily chasing it, but if the opportunity is there and you just got a great opportunity, I mean, this is the time to check. This is the time to do it. Now, I am a family guy, and I believe I'm going to always make sure my family's taken care of. I can say, I don't know if I'd have took that leap. I'll just be completely honest. I don't know if I'd have took that leap if she didn't have the opportunity that was presented to her at that position in Charlotte. I'll be completely honest. I don't know if I would have taken the leap. But because we're going to be pretty set with her position, it was okay, and I felt okay with doing it. But the conversation was good. She wasn't really into the coach's wife mentality. She hadn't gotten there yet, so she wasn't really, because I was, going to the office and I was back home. My weekends were free. I never worked. I had staff, so I didn't have to really go in on weekends, and we could go do wherever, whenever. We could go do whatever we wanted to. Well, when the coaching time came, it was a little different for her. I had at the time our kids are 14 months apart. So I'm like, I'm coaching, I'm at the school, I'm at wherever. And it wore on her for a while. But I think once she started to like meet, and I think anybody who wants to know this question, the biggest thing is getting her around really solid coaches' wives. That's what made her comfortable when we were in Raleigh and DJ Jones, Derek Jones, his wife would invite her out with her and some of the other coaches' wives at Duke, and she was able to meet. We got to ECU, so she was able to start meeting other coaches' wives, and they were able to start telling their stories. Because like that's one thing that was big for my wife that made her like really understand this journey, is because all she was seeing was all these Power 5 coaches that I knew and their wives like living this great life, and she was like, God, they're living great. Like, that's not what we're doing right now. I'm like, but you got to understand, all these guys didn't start right there. So once their wives were telling her their war stories about how they were when they were coaching D2 ball and coaching in FCS, and just having struggle meal, ramen noodles and sandwiches and Lay's chips and stuff. So she was hearing those stories, and it started to all make sense for her. And I think once she got connected with those coaches' wives, they're the ones who really made her feel a lot more comfortable about this whole process, and just telling her to trust it, and they having that support system. So I would say get her connected around some coaches, some really good coaches' wives who have been there, done that, that can have those and some she can ask open conversation, have conversation with. But the conversation was a little funny at first. It was a little awkward, but she became, now she's like the ultimate coach's wife. Like this whole move to Denver, I didn't call the moving company. She got the whole move set up. Like she has it like down to a science at this point. So I just go to work.
That's awesome. Any other questions, guys? One question I always like to ask coaches too, maybe we'll end on this unless somebody else has something, is one coach that you've never worked with that you'd want to work with, maybe a guy that you would hire or a guy that could potentially hire you. If you had to pick one coach, who would that be?
Man, gotta be Saban. I gotta just sit in there and hear. I just gotta hear. I gotta sure. What the method is. Like, what is the method? How is it so? And I got a good feel of what the method is, but why is it so consistent? It's so consistent. Like, it's so consistent. What's the consistency? How are you guys so successful so much? And I just want to sit in there and be a sponge. I don't have to say a word. I just want to sit in there, listen, learn, and just hear how they're so successful. That'd probably be one, for sure. He'd probably be top of the list for sure.
Well, I hope you get that opportunity then, if that's what you want to do. He doesn't have another 15. Well, shoot, he might have another 15 years, but hopefully sooner than later that's the case. Any other questions, guys? Really, really appreciate you sharing your story, Chris. That was awesome stuff. Anything else you want to add before we dip?
No, man, I'm good, man. I'm easy to find, man, guys. If you ever got any questions, or want to talk, got any other any questions, man, I'm one of those guys, firm believer in paying it forward, because it's guys out here that gave me advice, that picked up the phone for me, and it's a lot of guys. I mentioned a lot of names, and every person's name that I mentioned plays a major role in where I am. And the reason they play a major role is because whenever I called them, they picked up the phone. And I'm a firm believer in that. I'm not a firm believer in big timing people. And, if I give you my number and say, give me a call, that's not just convention talk, as they like to say. That's not convention talk with me. If you text me, I'm going to text you back. Obviously, you get busy. So if it's not, I'm not going to might not be right back, but I promise you, I'll hit you right back. Because one day, I always remember a coach telling me, somebody one day, you're going to need somebody to pick up the phone for you. So when somebody calls you, make sure you pick up the phone, because people do not forget who does not pick up the phone for them. People don't forget that. And then people do never forget the ones that when they want something or need something, how they can blow your phone up. So yeah, if you ever got any question, anything, man, reach out. I'm definitely willing to chop it up and talk, and anything, any way I can help anybody, man, I'll try my best.
That's awesome. And I'm sure a lot of people learn from your story and from this in particular. So again, thank you for sharing. If there's anything we can ever help with here, if you ever want to come on and talk ball too, deal, whatever you want to do. Or if you got any young guns you think would do a great job on some of this, we'd love to have them too. So we appreciate the time, Coach. Thank you.